Welcome to the Darkstream, Voxday, voxday.net, and as you can see, unauthorized.tv. So we're back live, we're back working. The devs just completed an absolutely massive infrastructure change. It doesn't look any different to you guys, I expect, but we now have the system working in more or less parallel. There's still a fair amount of things that need to be done. Right now it's working good on the streaming, but we need to make it so that people can upload all their videos properly, for stuff that's pre-recorded and all that. So, but we're getting there. And I was talking to one of the Arctoons devs, actually the lead Arctoon dev, and the amazing thing was that because he hadn't read the blog or anything, hadn't paid attention to any of that sort of thing, he was under the impression that everything was still just operating normally. I mean, people are still able to buy books from the store. They're still able to watch the videos. People are still streaming live and that sort of thing. Because I was feeling a little bit self-critical about how we didn't bulletproof the system quite as well as we would have liked. I feel like, and I mentioned this before, I felt like we got a bit complacent and hadn't really been dealing with any significant conflict since the Owen and the Patreon situation. So this is really good because it's really gotten us focused now, and I'm not just talking about me, I'm talking about the devs on all the various teams, to really pay attention to and focus on strengthening the infrastructure stuff. We've been thinking more about marketing and selling stuff and features and making the product better. And those are good things. I'm not saying those are not good things, but what's fundamentally important, the most important thing right now, is reliable, strong infrastructure that is anti-fragile. And, there are no guarantees. It wouldn't matter if somebody gave us $1 billion and said, hey, just make the best streaming stuff that you can. YouTube gets a lot more money than that every year, and they are struggling. I've said for a long time, sooner or later, Google's going to pull the plug. How soon it will be, I don't know. But think about this. It wasn't that long ago that Vice was being valued at $5.7 billion. And they're gone. They're dead. They filed for bankruptcy. They're leaving the sites up for a while. They're hoping to find someone to buy it, but who would want to buy it? And the thing that was really amusing, let me see if I can find this here. There's a Vice journalist had, let's see here. I think this might be it. Let me see. Yeah, that's it. Okay. So this is a Vice journalist. It says, and there's actually two of these. I'm going to grab the other one here too. Because it's not just Vice. It's almost all of these propped up things. Okay, here we go. It's from Tron L. Dowd. I have no idea who he is, but apparently he's a writer. He says, word on the street is they're deleting the Vice website. This means that as of later this week, all three publications where I accrued thousands of bylines since the very start of my career will no longer have an online presence. And there's 381,000 views of that tweet, which tells you that people are very concerned about what's happening in the social media sphere. He says, yes, I've saved the majority of my stories from Vice News, Queen's Trib, I don't know, Queen's Tribune maybe, and The Messenger. But their non-existence on the internet will irrevocably damage my online presence as a reporter. How does one not feel like they've wasted their entire adult life pursuing journalism? Because you're pursuing journalism? I would think that was pretty obvious, if not existential. This is all I've ever wanted to do. Okay? And despite earning opportunity after opportunity because I was damn good at it, I've been reminded at every turn just how much this business hates me. Plenty of people smarter and more senior than me have promised me the industry will bounce back from the media death spiral we've been stuck in for the past year. No, it won't. But it's really tough to convince myself that it's worth weathering the storm. It isn't. And the reason it isn't is because you cannot succeed in journalism and tell the truth in any way, in any capacity. It's totally impossible, and it has always been totally impossible. You will not be permitted to tell the truth. And I'm not saying that based on theory. I'm not saying that based on stuff I've read. I'm saying that from my personal experience writing for a major newspaper, being openly acknowledged as one of the best writers at that newspaper, and being told you will never be permitted to write on the opinions editorial page. Flat out. And what was interesting was that some of the old school journalists, some of the old school infrastructure didn't get that. Now this is back in like 1992, 1993, so this is quite a while ago. And what had happened was that there was I think his name was maybe DJ Tice. He was the token conservative, the token right-winger on the Star Tribune editorial page. His pieces would run, I think he'd run like 2 or 3 pieces a week. And on one of the days, it was always there was a point counterpoint that you'd have one of the editors would write a opinion piece, and he representing the left-wing / DFL / Democrat view, and then Tice would write the piece that was supposed to be the conservative Republican view. Of course, he was about as conservative as Bob Dole or Mitt Romney, the usual personally conservative but sort of thing. He's a good guy. He's a good writer, smart, but not exactly a fire breather. Anyhow, he got an opportunity, and I think he went to a newspaper in North Carolina or something like that. Anyhow, he was no longer at the Pioneer Press, and so I thought, because I was the lead columnist on the tech page, and my column was popular enough and well supported enough that they would even like put me on the occasional billboard or whatever, in the city. And so I thought, well, hey, here's an opportunity to put on the big boy pants, instead of writing about video games and that sort of thing. Maybe I can also write about politics. And so I wrote 3 sample columns, and turned them into the chief editor. And then I got a phone call from the tech editor, who I was on very good terms with. He said, "Hey, so and so, I can't remember the guy's name. He's like, so and so wants you to come in and talk to you." And I said, "Oh, well, that sounds promising." And he kind of laughed. And I was thinking at the time that he was concerned about losing me to the op-ed page. And I assured him, look, I don't, even if I'm writing op-ed, I'm still a game developer. I'm still gonna want to write about games. I mean, for crying out loud, my column is my game review column is nationally syndicated. Why would why would I stop? Turned out I completely misread why he was laughing. He was laughing because he knew perfectly well that there was not a chance in hell that they were going to put me on the op-ed page. And some people, I suppose, might have been upset about this. Some people might have been bitter about this. I always thought the guy did me a massive favor. The guy prevented me from ever putting myself in a situation like that former vice journalist is in, because he told me, I walk in, he's got my 3 columns, printed out, sitting on his desk, and he thanks me for coming in and everything. And I said, so what did you think? And he said, look, I need to tell you, I think you're one of our best writers. He said, you write a really good column. You're only the 6th person who's ever been from the paper who's ever been nationally syndicated. We really like what you do. And so I'm thinking, oh, this sounds promising. And then he says, but I need to tell you that you will never be an op-ed writer. He said, you're never going to be allowed to write on the opinion page. I said, okay, how does that compute? And he said, your views are outside the acceptable range. He said, let me give you an example. And he says, here you've written a column about why the why the football stadium should not be publicly funded. He said, and it's a very convincing article. You make really good points. He said, after reading it, I am convinced that it's not a good idea to do that. I'm fully convinced that the city will never make enough money back from that to justify it. I said, okay. By this point, I've realized that I'm clearly missing something. And he says, our business, a significant part of our business, depends upon that football stadium. He said, we have to support the party line. It is literally in our financial interest to do so. Our jobs may depend upon that football stadium being built. It's like, I'm beginning to see why I'm not going to be allowed to write for it. And he said, he said, I respect your willingness to say exactly what you think. He said, that's a good thing, but it's not fitting for what we do here. It's not acceptable. It's not suitable. And he didn't come right out and say it. The examples that he chose, the other example that he chose was on that level of not being particularly political, but being more sort of, party line oriented. But it was very, very clear that from a political perspective, my views at the time were way too libertarian. And of course, today, they'd be way too Christian and way too nationalist. Especially because the acceptable range has moved, further into clown world. And so it was really interesting a few years later when Universal Press Syndicate picked up my WorldNet Daily column. And you may recall, I started writing political commentary by accident. Not everybody knows this because not everybody's been around since 2001. But I was I stopped writing my game syndicated column, my syndicated game column. I don't know, maybe 1990. I don't remember when I stopped, or when I stopped. Anyhow, I started writing for WorldNet Daily, and I was just doing technology stuff, games and technology, and that was really all I was interested in doing. But after 9/11, I wrote a column that was headlined "Yield No More Freedom," because I understood what was coming with the Patriot Act. It was very, very clear. I mean, it wasn't called the Patriot Act yet because I wrote the column on September 12th. But it was already clear one day after 9/11 that the powers that be, the powers that we now call clown world, were definitely going to try to use it to repress freedom and take away American rights, and also engage in some sort of war. At the time, we didn't know where they were going to go, but we knew they were going to go bomb somebody and invade somebody. I remember we had a soccer practice maybe 2 days later or something, and one of my teammates said, "Well, what do you think that the Americans are going to do?" I said, "Oh, we're going to invade somebody." He said, "Well, who?" I said, "I don't know, but I guarantee you they're going to go to war with somebody, because there's no way they're going to let an emergency or a crisis of this scale and scope go to waste." And they didn't. And so because of the popularity of that column, Joe Farah contacted me and said, "Look, I think you're wasted on doing this game and technology stuff. Why don't you write political stuff?" And so I did. I think I wrote something like 512 columns for them from 2001 to 2011. So I did end up on an op-ed page of sorts, but it had to be like UATV. It had to be independent, because where it was interesting then was after the WorldNet Daily column got popular enough, Universal Press Syndicate was casting about for what they hoped to be the successor to William F. Buckley, who was essentially on his last columnist legs. And so they looked over everybody. And believe it or not, I was supposed to be the anointed successor to William F. Buckley, because clearly nobody had told the people at this syndication service that I was persona non grata. And they found that out pretty quickly. I even warned them. I said, "Look, I don't think you're going to have a lot of success putting me on the editorial pages of the newspapers around the country. And, sure enough, they made one sale. One sale. It was to the Dallas Morning News back when Rod Dreher was the editor-in-chief, or the editor for the op-ed editor. And they picked my column up and they dropped it within 2 weeks. And keep in mind, I wasn't writing anything controversial. In fact, one of the things that the syndicate suspected was they thought, well, maybe your writing is above the 8th grade level that is generally preferred. Maybe you could try dumbing it down a bit. So for about 6 months, I would write my WorldNet Daily column, and then I would dumb it down for the newspapers. It made no difference. I mean, that was not the problem. The problem was I was expressing views that were outside the permitted range, which is probably why it was a lot easier for me to understand the nature of the narrative than it was for your average, writer, reporter, journalist, whatever. It wasn't just a question of observing that it was there or detecting that it was there. I'd literally been informed and then had it demonstrated how it worked. And then, of course, when you see ticket takers like Ben Shapiro just being pushed everywhere, from the newspapers to Amazon to YouTube, etc., that it's not organic. I mean, very, very few people actually pay attention to Ben Shapiro or take him seriously. Back when I used to be privy to the WorldNet Daily column readership numbers, and Shapiro was never in the top 10. He was maybe like around 14, 15 or so. Joe Farrow was obviously always on top because he had a daily column, and of course it was his site, so that made sense. Pat Buchanan was always number 2, Ann Coulter number 3, I was number 4, and Michelle Malkin was number 5. Reliably. Every now and then you'd have some random column, that was particularly timely or something blow up, but that was pretty consistent for 2 years or so, the 2 years that everybody was there. And again, this isn't something to be upset about or bitter about. It's just the way that it is. And the sooner that you just accept it and roll with it and figure out where you can actually do the things that you do, the better. We're not surprised when some clown world converged corporation gets their hands on some aspect of our business and then goes, oh, wait a minute, we don't want this, and gets rid of it. I mean, we wouldn't have gone and talked to them or tried to work with them in the first place. It's not like, it's not like I finished a Sea of Skulls and sent it off to Tor Books. Gee, do you want to publish this? Obviously they don't. Of course they don't. I mean, I was informed, in fact, in 2008, I believe it was, by Charles Stross, that no, what he called mainstream, no mainstream science fiction publisher will ever publish you because you're a bad person. At the time, I thought it was pretty funny because I'd never published with genre publishers. My publisher was Pocketbook / Simon & Schuster. Why would I want to even publish with these little genre publishers? And it was kind of funny. I was on John Della Rosa's stream Was it last night or the night before? It's all blurring together. I have been so busy lately, but you know, it was it was hilarious to find out that these you know big mainstream publishers, they're paying like $2,000 advances. You know, and the books are not even earning out. That's how few they sell. So it when we talk about Clown World being fake and gay, I mean, we mean it literally. I mean, okay, the the gay being a bit of an exaggeration, although there's obviously a lot more of that in Hollywood and some aspects of Clown World than you might think. Um, Although, I have to admit, uh, given that um, given that I was literally on a gay record label, my perspective is probably a little skewed. Um, but it's all fake. None of the numbers are real. You know, um, Psychosonic had four Billboard Top 40 club hits, and it's not that our stuff didn't actually get played on the radio, didn't get played in the clubs, that sort of thing. But I'm pretty sure, based on on the way that um, the record label talked about things, I'm pretty sure that they were paying a certain agreed upon amount of money to get the book or to get the song at a certain spot in the charts. You know, I never asked them specifically, but uh, just based on the way that the topic was discussed, the way that they knew what it was going to be, more or less, before a week or two before it happened. And it's the same. It's how Scalzi always used to be on the New York Times bestseller list. It's the same thing. I'm sure they cloak it in some way where you need to buy a box of books from this particular bookstore or something like that. Um, but it's all fake. It's all intended to create a false impression of success that will cause people to come in. I mean, it's like speaking of Scalzi, I mean, I exposed him back in uh, SJWs Always Lie. He's running around talking about 2 million views a month or something like that, and it turned out that he had like his best year that he ever had was 8 million for the year. He'd literally never ever had the kind of traffic that he claimed. And so, the only success that matters is what's real. And what's real is what we're doing at Castalia. It's what we're doing at Unauthorized. Like Owen likes to say, he might be wrong, but he's not going to lie to you. And also, yeah, not to toot our own horns or anything, but one thing I did think was funny was that there's this new uh, economist slash financial analyst de jour. His name's Zoltan. He's a Hungarian, worked for Credit Suisse for 8 years. He's just started doing his own thing. And he's a specialist in what they call shadow banking. And he's a smart guy. He's a very sharp guy, very successful. But what I thought was funny was that he's being talked up in the financial media now because, and hold on to your seats, he's been talking about the idea that the world financial system is going to break apart. I mean, we've literally been talking about that here, and I've been writing about that on the blog for at least the last 2 years. You know, I even called it the grand bifurcation, which demonstrates my total rhetorical incompetence, because there's no chance that that will ever be adopted by anybody but me. But it's the same thing. Basically, what we have is a bona fide clown world expert who is being, he's the new NN Taleb. Taleb was the 2008 version. This guy's the 2024 version. But he's warning everyone now what we've been telling people for 2 years, which is the global financial order is dividing in two. And so a lot of the stuff that we're seeing is a result of that. A lot of the failures of these companies, and Vice and those sort of things, they're not that big. They were never that big. They were never profitable. But they're not tiny operations. And so these mid-size operations are failing. It's not going to be that long before some of the bigger operations start failing. I'm a little surprised that Marvel and DC are still even functioning at all. I believe Ethan Van Sciver is absolutely correct. They're going to be shut down in everything but name pretty soon. Sacrificial Lamb says, it is all fake. As an example, Marvel Comics overships their comics all the time. Yeah, they've done it for years. I was always amazed by the numbers that they claimed. And then you would see on Amazon that we'd release, an Alt Hero Q or something, and it would be like #1. Not just for a day, but for like 3 days. And I'm thinking, well, how are they selling 500,000 copies or whatever they're claiming, 85,000 copies, and they're selling less on Amazon than we are? I mean, I know what percentage of the overall publishing industry Amazon represents at the time. That's how is that even possible? Well, the answer is it wasn't. It was fake. And now it is gay. That's what Marvel Comics is now. By the way, speaking of comics, I just got the 3rd issue of Black Warrant from the legend Chuck Dixon. It is amazing. The whole thing is amazing. If you like anything about the Punisher, this is like the Punisher Unleashed, only he's also slaughtering the narrative along with all of the bad actors. So I strongly suspect that you're going to enjoy it a lot. Anyhow, the more that we focus on the truth, the more that we focus on what's good, what's beautiful, the more that we speak the truth of the gospel, share the news of Jesus Christ, the more opposition we're going to entail as clown world descends into madness. So be prepared for that. Don't be surprised by that. It's not, I've always been totally dubious of the prosperity gospel folks. What they do and the way they talk always reminds me of the occultists, the Scott Adams who, what's the difference between visualize success and name it, claim it? I guess, in one you're theoretically doing it in Jesus's name, in the other you're just visualizing it or claiming it in your own name. But I mean, to me, it all strikes me as very much a form of magic, and um, and so I was always dubious about that. And if you look at the examples, if you look at how Jesus ended up, if you look how the Apostle Paul ended up, if you look at the way that the various disciples ended up, um, Jesus literally said, um, you know, you're going to have to follow the hard and narrow path. And maybe that primarily refers to the moral aspects, but I think it probably applies more generally. You know, I think if you look at the way that Jesus rejected all the kingdoms of the world and all the treasure and all that sort of thing, I don't think that sort of thing can be our focus. Now, does that mean it's wrong to buy a nice house or to drive a nice car or whatever else? I don't know. Certainly you have the parable of the rich man and the eye of the needle, and of course there's all those esoteric explanations of how the Bible doesn't mean what the Bible says, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, it's pretty clear when people are living for money versus living for something else. I'm certainly not one to be claiming I'm living some sort of vow of poverty. I mean, just look at the books behind me alone. They're beautiful and they're valuable. And the fact that we also create them is not really relevant to the issue. My point being is that we can discuss these things without an assumption of me or anyone else being a paragon of them. We're not the point. I'm not the point. But I do think it's good to consider these things, because if there's one thing that we've learned over the past couple of years, it's that if you allow yourself to accept the comfortable lies, if you allow yourself to accept the falsehoods that make you feel better, you will eventually lose the ability to distinguish between what's true and what's false. Eventually you start to believe that anything that makes you feel comfortable is true, and anything that makes you feel uncomfortable is false. And that way lies madness. When something makes me uncomfortable, that's when I know that I'm probably being tempted to rationalize it away. And the crazy thing is, the smarter you are, the easier it is to rationalize something that's obviously false. That's why the smarter you are, the more potentially dangerous to yourself and self-destructive you are capable of being. If you've got your average 80 IQ guy who works as a janitor, his ability to screw up his own life and others is pretty much limited to his immediate area. Maybe he can maybe he abuses a little girl who goes to the school that he cleans. Maybe he, beats up his wife or something. His ability to affect others is fairly limited. Not saying it's nothing, just saying it's fairly limited compared to, the Robert McNamara, the brilliant guy and the leader of the best and brightest, who gets 60,000 young American men killed in Vietnam. You have to be pretty smart to be in a position to do that much harm and that much damage. Which is something that, if you do happen to be smarter than the average bear, you need to be aware of. You need to be aware of when you are rationalizing your own desires instead of doing what's right. When you're rationalizing what you want to do instead of doing what you should. So it's just, I think, a good sort of metric that if something makes you uncomfortable, don't avoid it. If the topic makes you uncomfortable, look more closely at it. Figure out why it makes you uncomfortable. If you look at what the gammas do, even just online, in online discourse and comments, they assiduously avoid that which makes them uncomfortable. They will not even examine it, much less fairly, because their whole focus is avoiding emotional pain. And if you avoid emotional pain, then you're going to blind yourself to at least certain elements of reality. Silent Draco says, wisdom and ability to speak the truth get more important. Well, absolutely. And the fewer people that are willing to speak the truth, the more important it becomes. I've been very fortunate in that because I got forced into this, public position, however modest, I've always been aware that no matter what I write, no matter what I say in a video, there's going to be dozens, if not hundreds, of people closely analyzing it, looking for falsehoods and looking for mistakes and looking for things to criticize. I thought Amanda Robb, she's the Rolling Stone journalist of MAGA hat fame. She's the one that was bounced all over the place trying to interview my public relations director about comics. And I thought that she paid me one of the nicer compliments I've ever been paid, which was she was complaining in a piece that or it was an interview or something that she did with NPR. And she was saying that she'd spent 3 hours interviewing me and that I was too slippery to give her anything that she could use. The unspoken part being, I didn't give her any rhetorical kill shots to use against me. But the thing is that it's relatively easy to do as long as you speak the truth, because it's very, very hard to catch somebody out when what they say is true. You'll notice that the single most important hit piece or hit shot that's ever been used against me was what I said about N.K. Jemisin. And the funny thing is that in order to use it, they have to clip part of the sentence out, and they have to make sure that they don't ever address why I said anything or what I was responding to. Because of course, when they do quote the whole thing, when they quote the whole piece, it naturally it's obviously a response to something that somebody else said. And then they look at what she said, and what she said was far more objectionable and far more obviously racist than what I said. Because what I said is absolutely 100% true. And what she said was observably and absurdly false. No, the law does not permit white people in Texas and Florida to freely shoot and kill black people. I mean, it was such a stupid thing to say, and it's amazing that the amassed power of the media was still able to take that one tiny little, not even useful piece and still actually make a certain amount of hay out of it. But I mean, it's pretty funny to me to think that was like the most useful thing that they could find. But it is what it is. And needless to say, Owen makes it a little bit easier on them. Owen's like setting up the tee, putting the ball on the tee, saying, "Do you want to take a few practice swings first before you really knock it out of the park?" Oh my. Anyhow, but it's all good. So I'm going to sign off here in a minute. Does anyone have any questions about what's going on with unauthorized or with Castalia at the moment? I think we've got things more or less under control. Hoping to allow you guys to start getting subscriptions going again before the end of the month. We'll have to wait and see. But that's what we're working towards. I do need to see if we can reduce this delay a little bit. Yes. Go ahead and ask the question then. It wasn't actually a rhetorical question. It was just more like, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them now. Do we have to sign up for a subscription again? Yes. But your existing login will work. So once the subscriptions are available, we'll put up the notice. We'll mention it on the streams, etc., etc. Our goal is going to be to build back up to 10,000 subscriptions. That's where I think that we should be before we start looking at doing some of the things that we plan to do for the next step. I mean, much as we'd like to, we're not getting $2 billion a year from Google to run this, and so we do need to have the funds coming in to pay for the servers, etc., etc. Now, we've been very conservative. That's why we're, just running it, on the basis of what we'd already built up already. We can go on for, several months if we had to, but we're not going to have to. We've already been contacted by I don't even know how many different providers, but again, things are very different than they were back in 2015, 2016. Most companies are a lot less interested in playing thought police, and they're a lot more interested in getting business, because think about this, and this maybe will be encouraging to some of you. The payment processors are just middlemen, right? Just middlemen. And so whatever little piece of the action that they take is completely dependent upon the revenues of all the other companies. Well, Vice no longer has any revenue. So all the revenue they had from Vice, all the revenue they had from those other sites that the guy mentioned, is gone. Furthermore, the revenues of the existing companies have declined considerably. Disney Plus, Netflix, ESPN, all of those big online businesses have shrunk, which means that there is no way for the payment processors to make money any other way. All they can do is collect their little toll to help you get paid. You don't get paid, they make no money. So some of them are getting increasingly desperate too. Any Midnight's War updates? I just need the time. We're already done with the first omnibus. I just need to finish getting it proofed. And the second one, I think, is very nearly done. So again, it's just a matter of finding the time. But when we have infrastructure matters to deal with, those have to take priority. Alt Hero Q is also done, same boat. So, but we should be able to. I mean, I just need to find the time to get those two things corrected. The corrections themselves will take like a day. So I'll see what I can do. As part of Unauthorized Down, yes. The big migration that they did, there's still some of it that for some reason needs to be finished. Some of those live streams are down. I think if you look at my page on the Darkstream, I think like 3 of my videos are down too. So just sit tight. All this stuff's going to be fixed. All this stuff's going to be corrected. In the meantime, maybe examine some of the other stuff, some of the other creators that are up there that you haven't tried before. There's a ridiculous number of videos up there now. It's like well over 5,000. I don't even know what it is. But all this stuff is being actively addressed, and the devs are completely on top of it. So, are recent uploads going to be added back to the main page of UATV? We're going to do something. I don't know exactly what the plan is, but we will come up with something. We did get, that was actually a bit of what turned out to be, we should have taken it as a bit of a warning that was a potential vulnerability. Basically, some of the folks didn't want to have their people coming and seeing some of the stuff that was popping up with, mostly related to Owen's videos. And so that's why we just thought, okay, the easiest thing is just to take it down right away, which we did. So, all right, well, it looks like my my battery is running out here. So, wow, I did go on for a long time with John Delarose. Anyhow, one last bit of news. The War Dogs Incorporated omnibus, which is called War Dogs Incorporated, is now available. We'll probably get it up. Well, it's not actually available. It's now in the system. We'll probably announce the launch of that hardcover on Monday. So have a good weekend. I'm Vox Day, and this is the Darkstream.